It's really wonderful to be with you this evening. How many of you have been to CCARE events before? Wonderful. How many don't know anything about it? You just came here to see Eileen and you could care less? At least you're honest. Okay. Well, let me give you a little background about why we're doing this, the work that we do here. And it's not all about wonderful fashion like I'm usually interested in. So here at Stanford, we have a center which I founded and direct, which really examines the neural basis for compassion and altruism. And the reason that I and others have an interest in this is because if you look at the core of every religious practice, you will see that, at least in theory, compassion is at its core. But if you even look at that even closer and ask yourself why, there is indeed a reason. And fundamentally, if you look at the evolution of our species, our default mode is really to care, nurture each other. And in fact, science has shown that when you do that, not only do you feel better and benefit the other person, but in fact, when you practice these types of behaviors with intention, that is when your physiology works its best. And in fact, it's associated with a boost in your immune system, it's associated with a decrease in your blood pressure, actually improved cardiac function, and a decrease in stress hormones. And in fact, there have been studies that have been shown that when individuals practice compassion, as an example, volunteering to care for others who are in need or to do service for others, that it actually is associated with a significant increase in longevity. And so that is one of the reasons we explore this, to find techniques that we can give to individuals to improve their lives, make them happier, and really focused on being more compassionate human beings and connecting with others. So one thing that we do is fundamental research in this domain, and this could be very basic research with animals and rodents, examining neural pathways, to actually developing interventions or practices and studying them and to see how they impact individuals in regard to their physiology or their gene expression in the context of these behaviors. And it's really exciting work, and it's really life-changing work that we're engaged in, and our work has really benefited a lot of people. And in fact, actually, the Dalai Lama is the founding benefactor of our work here at Stanford. So how does Eileen Fisher fit in this? And really, it actually is not a stretch at all. And some of you who have visited us with other of our events, and this is called a Conversation on Compassion, which frankly is one of my favorite things to do because I get to meet people I like and I'm interested in and who are heroes of mine. And Eileen is a hero on a variety of different levels. And I've had the pleasure of really over a fairly short period of time getting to know her a little bit. And hopefully you're going to do that today or this evening. Eileen, maybe, and what I like to do with some individuals is, because often people's present story is a manifestation of their backstory.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so I know you're one of 7 children?
7 children, yes.
6 girls?
6 girls, good. You have a good memory.
But I think you've made this comment on more than one occasion that at that time your parents were focused on the male children.
One.
The one male child. So isn't that interesting? The one male child got focused on, and you indicated that your parents saved for him to go to college because he had to support a family. Right. I guess the presumption was that you would marry somebody and
the very clear conversation was exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, when my dad sat me down and said, I know you want to go to college, but we have 7 children and can't afford to send all of you to college, and though it would be a good thing for you to go to college, it certainly isn't necessary, because you're going to meet a man and he will support you. And your brother's going to need to go to college because he'll need to support a woman one day. He never ended up going to college.
That may be another story.
And my dad did apologize many years later. So.
But you did go to college, and you started out as a math major, but switched over to home ec.
Yes, right.
I have to learn.
Interior design, right, home ec, right.
But it was called home ec, right?
It was in those days.
Yeah, yeah.
It moved into architecture the following year, but so I'm dating myself now.
But along that line, though, ultimately you started as a math major, though, switched over to that, and then sort of demonstrated this interest in design.
Right.
But on the other hand, as we were talking about earlier, you say you've always been a seeker.
Yeah.
And how does that intertwine with this, and when did this interest really first manifest, and was it always a part of how you saw yourself living your life?
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think when I would say I first became a seeker. I don't think when I was young. Not like you, I didn't have an experience like that. Probably in my late 20s, I think, maybe around 30 or so, I got involved in a Gurdjieff group. I don't know if that resonates for anyone, but it's a lot about awareness, consciousness, that kind of thing. And simultaneously, I was in therapy and struggling with the relationship I was in and trying to understand my life. And so I think I started down a path at that point of trying to understand what I was doing and what my life was about. And so I pursued a lot of things, yoga, meditation, journaling, dance, all kinds. I went to workshops. I loved all that stuff. And maybe this is where the business starts to come in. So as I was working, and in the early days of working, it was really pretty much just a vision. I was just trying to bring my pictures that I had in my mind sort of out and do what I was trying to do, what I was sort of coming through me. And what am I going to say about that? And I think that also I was just trying to create an environment that was a little kinder than most places. I had worked in a lot of restaurants. I'd worked at Burger King. No offense to Burger King.
I worked at Burger King.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I know we had a lot in common. You know what I'm saying?
I could never make the Whopper right, though.
That's funny. The Whopper was pretty easy, actually.
And look what happened. I'm a neurosurgeon.
That's very funny. I hated washing the dishes, though. I always get stuck washing all the dishes and the pots and pans at the end. Anyway, no, the hard part really, though, was the way people treated you. And that people thought they could yell at you and order you around. You were slaves or something. I don't know. And so I knew that when I created a business, I wanted it to be a kinder kind of place. And I just wanted to treat people the way I would like people to treat me, just simple human beings, that's all, And so I think it just became a basic foundation. Let's just be kind to each other, and treat each other well. And I think, it's still like that. And over time, as I got more engaged in my sort of seeking work, and probably about 15 years ago, I went to Omega Institute, and I took a dance movement, contemplative dance class with this woman named Zuleika, who at the end of that, I was at another difficult stage in my life, and I'd been married, and I had 2 small children, and was going through a very difficult divorce, and the business was growing like crazy, and I was just tugged and pulled in a million directions. And so I took this program, and I just felt like ecstatic. I was just like in my body, alive, like freed up. It was like somehow I thought I found it. I found something, that was really changed my life. And so I brought her to the workplace, and I wanted everyone to dance,
And did that work?
Well, people were they were rolling their eyes, and it's market week, Eileen, and we got deadlines and all of that, So, let me take this off, getting hot. Dancing. So, it's the best. But some people liked it, and I thought it was a helpful thing that we could move around and we could all feel good, and but it was mixed, the response, and so I kind of withdrew on that topic, but I continued my own practice. I would meditate and do yoga and go on retreats and things like that, and continued to bring different practices into the workplace. So started giving wellness benefits, so that I wanted people to have access to other kinds of wellness. So besides just going to wonderful doctors, I wanted people to have opportunities to go to, whatever, chiropractors, therapists, complementary medicine, get massages, things of that nature. So,
but it's really quite amazing, because you've been at the forefront of this, because while this is being recognized now,
right,
really
people are
as
doing
being quite
this.
Important.
Yeah.
It certainly wasn't common when you began that at all, and I would imagine that people question that, and also maybe even ask, how does this fit into the business environment, and why are you doing this?
Right. Yes, they did. And at the same time, we also drew in people who actually liked those practices, and would go to the yoga class, or would use the benefits, and we drew a sort of like-minded person, and over time it built an interesting culture, and people who that sort of caring kind of people also care very much about the workers in the factories, and they care very much about the planet. And so over the years, the work that we're doing has just deepened, and we've made massive commitments to sustainability. Our products, it's really amazing.
And we'll talk about that
Yeah.
in a little bit. Well, so it's interesting though, because it's wonderful when people are in a position to find a job where they like to work at. How many people work at a job that they just jump up every morning and want to go to, because every bit of it is about your values? And how many people have never heard of such a thing? But it is hard. I mean, unfortunately, I think oftentimes people work to live, but they, and it's probably less likely that you're able to live to work, because you're so ecstatic. And in fact, when you have that, you're not even working, you're just having a wonderful, wonderful time.
I think I should actually correct you a little bit now, because
I don't like affirmative women.
Well, it's actually a lot of work, and actually people aren't always just dancing around all day.
No, I didn't mean to.
I knew you didn't mean that. I'm just teasing, but what's actually very interesting that's happening is that actually it is a lot of work. Like what you're saying, it's intentional. It has to be intentional. And I'm thinking about when I started, it was just kind of this, more than nice, there was a kindness about the people who were drawn in. But over time, we're getting more committed to actually taking that deeper. So besides the social and environmental work that we're doing, we're actually looking at kindness in a deeper way, and connecting it to authenticity and truth-telling. And so the idea of actually noticing what you're feeling, giving people feedback. One of the things we're working hard on in the company is teaching people how to give and receive feedback. So how to listen to yourself, to know what you're feeling, and to express that to your boss or your coworker. It's pretty interesting. It's helping, I think, people to show up differently. So it's compassion, and it's there's a sort of a reality or a depth or something that's really interesting that's starting to happen, and I don't know. You wanted to say something more, but I wanted to say something to some of the different questions too that came up. I was thinking about the man that spoke over there. Did he leave?
No, he's here.
He's still there?
Yes.
I wanted to say something to you because what is really occurring to me, and I do think we will hit a tipping point and things will change out there, but what I'm become more and more aware of is how much each one of us, really all we can do is, ourselves. All we can do is help ourselves to kind of show up differently and to bring more compassion and caring to the situations that we're in. And by doing that, as Gandhi would say, we become the change. So then there's a ripple effect around us. So just bringing kindness or just smiling at people or just, or going deeper and telling the truth in a skillful and kind way is how I think we will create environments that will ripple out and continue to change the world. But it really does start with each of us.
No, but it's really true. I mean, you can't have peace in the world unless you have peace in yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting against yourself all the time and not being your best self or being your authentic self, it's hard to have that manifest in how you interact, I think, oftentimes in others. Let me ask you a question, getting back, though, to...
But I did want to also say that we do also still struggle with ourselves all the time.
Yes, yes.
So that's a kind of a,
Well, I think, though, and that's another good point, is because a lot of people see people who nominally appear very successful, whatever domain it is, they go, boy, their life seems great and life's perfect for them. And oftentimes those people have suffered deeply or are suffering, and while, the outside of it looks all wonderful, oftentimes it's still difficult. And no matter what position you are in life, you are still a frail, fragile human being who is trying to make it in the world. And I think that's the human condition.
And I think it's really a daily, moment to moment thing that we struggle with. And what I'm really fascinated with is how we do that every day. Like I was thinking, you were talking about the Dalai Lama, and the struggles that go on in his country, and how he's able to be joyful. And my friend Zuleika that I was talking about earlier, she talks about in the midst of the struggle that we're going through every day, how do we still be joyful? How do we still bring caring and compassion to others?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the Dalai Lama, because though I was with him one time, and we all say he seems always so joyful no matter what happens, but I was with him one time after a monk had self-immolated regarding Tibet, and it was just announced, and I saw His Holiness, and he had his head down and he was shedding the tears. So even the Dalai Lama suffers, But it is being able, though, still in the face of all that, to recognize, I think, the joy of life and the possibilities, and always try to remain with an open heart and be optimistic. But getting back, and you were talking about how really you've been a pioneer in this concept of sustainability and business, and I've heard arguments, I think they're false arguments, that, geez, as an example, if I have to pay minimum wage, I can't give people insurance. If I do you ask me to do X, Y, or Z, and that's going to cost me money, and we're not making it now. And I have to say, I have been an entrepreneur and been in business, and I have tried myself to be authentic and do things, if you will, that always are characterized by kindness, and it always works out. When you are kind to people, they want to work with you, They work harder for you, and they show up. And has that been your experience?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there are times that as a business person you struggle because, I keep using that word struggle tonight. It's really not that bad. But there are times when you can't do all that you want to do. There are programs we'd like to be able to support, and we need resources to do other things. So you're always sort of balancing the budget. And recently we had been paying benefits, full benefits to all employees working 20 hours a week or more. And over the years, it became too burdensome for the company to carry. And so we had to talk to employees and say that we couldn't continue to carry that benefit. And that was really painful, And so sometimes you can't do everything that you want to do. And so you want to be generous, and and you have to also, when you're running a business, you have to make it work, and you have to be realistic, and
But I think that brings up a good point, and you said it yourself. You said, I had to sit down with the employees and talk to them. Yeah. And that's the difference oftentimes, is because there's a huge difference between sending out a notice or an email saying, you're now unemployed, or we're cutting the benefits, versus having transparency and honesty and being forthright and saying, here's the reality, and maybe even having options, and saying, this is the situation. At least my experience, maybe yours reflects this as well, is most people, when you do it that way, understand business reality, and they understand situations. And I think in your particular case, if I'm not mistaken, you have an employee stock option plan, which the employees own 1/3 of the company too, which is
40% today.
40%.
And actually, in a way, it is a different kind of business model, and it's partly that the employees own 40%, and they also, every year, we share 25% of the profits with employees. But also, there's a lot of engagement, like you were talking about, talking with them about different situations. So, twice a year we have company meetings where everyone is engaged, and we talk through different things, and from time to time, whether it's benefits or whether it's how the company's doing, or sustainability and some different projects or whatever, and we always engage the employees so people know what's going on and can have their voices heard.
Well, one of the problems, as you probably know, in Silicon Valley is, how you have an employee workforce that probably between the ages of 25 and 35 and 40. Right. And it's interesting because, and we're talking about health plans, in that context, we have an epidemic of stress, anxiety, isolation, loneliness, and depression. Yeah. And why is that? When you're employed at an incredible job, you're in one of the most affluent countries in the world, and why is that manifesting that way? Yeah. And I think part of it is people are too stressed and they feel too many demands, and oftentimes they don't have the coping skills or the tools necessary. You were talking about authenticity and sort of self-reflection, and I think that those are actually really, really important to allow somebody to grow, because as we were talking earlier, when somebody is motivated and engaged, you can't pay them enough for the work that they do. Yeah. But when they're in fear of their job, they don't feel there's open communication. When there's not transparency or a sense of trust, it always puts people.
I think. There's environments that are particularly stressful, I'm sure, and it's not that we don't have stress too, because we do. But I think it's a bigger thing that's going on around stress. I think there's basic missingness in our education and in our lives somehow, in terms of things like compassion, or I'm not really sure what's going on exactly, but then you add the tech world and almost the kind of addiction of it. we're substituting sometimes. I don't want to get into this topic, it's too complicated, but there is something going on that's creating the stress, I think, and the lack of connection or false connection through, these tech
that's right.
things and
I
stuff.
think somebody had a quote, we're all in this together, but so many of us feel alone.
Yeah, and I think we're disconnected. We're disconnected from each other. We're disconnected from ourselves. I think I think we have to change the way we educate people. But I think but what can the workplace do is my question. That's what's interesting to me. Like in the workplace, can we help with this? And lately I've gotten very excited about the whole idea of personal growth and development and personal transformation. And in fact, just recently opened a learning center because I really feel that this development of people, our ability to develop our humanity and understand ourselves and what holds us back and what would help us to show up better, what gets in our way, what I'm just passionate about, finding the best programs and the best ways to help people grow and develop. And so I really feel that we just don't have enough of that. We don't have access, or we don't have tools. We're like working so hard, and so I feel that companies can do something here in this area. We can help employees to grow and develop. We can offer programs. We can offer time off. I'm planning to offer, I'm already starting 3 days a year for every employee to go to these purpose workshops and personal growth and development and different things like that, because I think, and through that there's a lot of connection. So it's learning about connection to yourself and relationship and working together and all kinds of things. I just think that the work environment has an opportunity here to help with this disconnection that's happening, this disconnection to ourselves and this disconnection to each other. So we have a lot of practices where we work on things like active listening and really learning how to connect with each other. Go ahead.
No, I was just we were talking about authenticity, and I think one of the challenges for a lot of people is that a lot of people feel compelled to have this projection of who they want people to think they are, right? And it's not really necessarily who they are. Some people have asked me, geez, what's it like to be with the Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh or some of these spiritual leaders? And I always say, the amazing thing about it is that when you're with these people, you don't have to do this projection anymore because you were unconditionally loved. And it's an incredible thing because when you feel that people are seeing you as that flawed human being and just embrace you, you don't have to hide, you don't have to have this projection. What people don't understand, the creation and maintenance of this projection comes at an extraordinarily high cost. Now it's interesting because I give these different talks and I get actually emotional and will shed a tear, and I've had some people say, geez, why do you become so emotional? And I said, well, is there something wrong with being vulnerable? Because when you're vulnerable, that's when you are who you really are. You are showing yourself. And very seldom, if ever, have I had somebody reject me because I was too vulnerable, or I showed that I had a heart, or even that I was in pain. And I think this is really a hard thing for people to sort of let that go. But again, having been embraced by some people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and others, to know that you are so loved at such a deep level by just somebody embracing you like that is just the most amazing, incredible gift. And we have actually a compassion cultivation training program that gives people tools to allow themselves to be kind to themselves, which is also, how many people here have a hard time being kind to themselves? And it's like, that's one of the hardest, why do we feel we have to beat each other up or beat ourselves up? And because we're all okay. We just have to know that we're okay and let that shine. But I think that's really...
and I think one thing that I struggle with and I feel like I'm really learning about is feelings, is really knowing what I feel and, really being in touch with that. So when you talk about crying or, really knowing, when I feel what I feel. So and that's why in order to have an authentic conversation, you have to really work on what am I feeling now? What is that, And I was speaking of vulnerability. I was watching a Brene Brown.
Sure.
Everybody knows Brene Brown, but I was watching a short thing that she did on Oprah from a few years ago. But it was about how with vulnerability, we suppress all of our feelings, not just the bad ones. But she talks about even joy, and I'm just totally relating to that. How hard it is to experience joy. And I was having this experience the other day, and it sort of echoes what Brene was talking about, but my daughter is 22, and she, she's in and out and around and doesn't want to hang out with me too much. She hasn't since she was 13. And I'm still waiting for the day when she's going to just want to hang out with me, And so recently she said, "Oh, Mom, I took a job at your company. I'm going to work at the makerspace for a while." And I said, "Oh, really? But you live in Brooklyn. That's 2 hours away. How are you going to do that?" She said, "Well, I thought I'd come and stay with you like 3 or 4 nights a week." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And my heart just leapt with joy. I was like, "Oh, that's so great." And then 1 second later, I was like, "Oh yeah, but she'll probably do that for a week and then she'll be gone." And so it's I realized that I can't even let myself feel joy for 3 minutes, and it's really sad, And so how do anyway, it's just so interesting to me.
But, the thing is, though, until you're aware of it, it's like somebody said, you can't release yourself from prison unless you know you're in prison.
Right, right.
And I think really one of the keys is the self-awareness of this situation.
And I want to say about self-awareness, because that's something else that's really interesting to me. I've been a seeker, like you said, for forever, and what I've gotten really interested in the last year or two is embodiment. So I'm interested in, understanding, what I'm feeling, where I'm feeling it, and I'm noticing that it's my new sort of mindful practice. It's coming to me every day and every minute I'm starting to say, what am I feeling now? Oh, I'm noticing a little fear. People are looking at me. I can feel myself tensing, and then I can relax and then see what else happens. And I'm noticing this in meetings, that I can be in touch with what I'm feeling. And then I'm interviewing people because we're looking at some really high level people for some big positions in my company, and it's very intimidating. I'm like, whoa, I know how to design clothes and I know about my business, but all this other stuff, marketing and all this finance stuff. So I'm interviewing these really sophisticated business people, and I'm seeing myself I'm starting to notice what I'm feeling, and I'm realizing I'm shutting down. I'm getting that fuzzy feeling, and just oh my God, I'm not here. I'm not hearing what she's saying, And then, so afterwards I said, I think I need to see those last 2 candidates again, because I just completely shut down. I realized that I just shut down. But I let myself notice that I was afraid. And so that was what was really new for me. And then I saw the 2 candidates again for this job, and wow, one of them I think I would have rejected because I was intimidated by her. And then I saw myself showing up, and I'm asking questions, and all of a sudden I'm really engaged with her, and I'm realizing I really like this person. She's really interesting. And I felt really connected. It's like something shifted. So here's a person I would have in the past shut down because I might have been afraid. Like you were talking about Glenn Beck. When you mentioned him, I said, oh yeah, there's a person I just shut out. Sorry, I shouldn't have talked like this, but you're recording this.
Glenn Beck fans in here?
Sorry. So when you said that, I said, oh, sorry.
No. I'll tell you why in a second, but go ahead.
No, and so, but what I do, and this is a really good point, is I can shut down. If somebody intimidates me or someone talks at me or talks too fast, or, sometimes I might think they're more knowledgeable or they just have a different opinion than I have.
Yeah.
And then I realize I'm afraid, or I'm shutting down, or I don't want to bother to hear that, or and so I love what you were saying on the phone. You were saying it's really important not to just speak to like-minded people, to share these ideas and to really listen to people who have different opinions. So I took that to heart, and I'm doing that. So it's really, I think it's going to be life-changing.
Well, it's, we were having a phone conversation a few days ago, and one of the things that I tell people is when you hear somebody who has a profoundly different experience or worldview than you, what is your natural tendency? Usually you sit there and go, they're an idiot. Right? and the thing is...
It's really easy these days.
Yeah, well, with some people. But the problem is that when you take that mode, people are sensitive to how others react to them. I mean, that's part of our humanity, is that we have ingrained with us these abilities to process micro movements, people's facial expressions, their body language, and people know. And one of the things that I found, though, too, is that when you come onto somebody purely on a mental level to oppose them in perhaps a derogatory or forceful way, how often does that change their mind in your experience? It never changes their mind, does it? And we were just talking about Glenn Beck, and the reason that came up is the last time I was in this room was with Glenn Beck, and I had invited him to come here. Now, this is the first time I got left-wing hate mail. Now, can you imagine? Because, if you're into kindness and compassion and caring for others and having a worldview of being concerned, oftentimes that translates to sort of maybe a more left or progressive perspective instead of sort of individualistic capitalism that can leave people behind sometimes. And the thing I found with Glenn, and I will tell you, I feel as if he is my friend. Do I agree with him? Well, hell no. But what we can do based on mutual respect and actually love is to have a conversation where you actually listen. And when you do that, you can process, you can hear what they're saying without sort of the baggage that you put with it. And oftentimes you might change or they might change. But without that, they will not change at all. And that's really the key, is this engagement of people and having sort of this open-heartedness and not being disregarding. Because nobody in this room wants to be disregarded, right? I mean, I don't know a human being who says, please disregard me and ignore me and think my opinion is stupid. I mean, exactly. So I will tell you, I was actually just down with Glenn about a week ago in Dallas on his show, and we're talking about this book of mine, which I'll promote later. While I waited for he and I to have our conversation, I was watching his show, and he surrounds himself with two people who sort of promote his agenda, and this conversation started where they were talking about why do taxpayers have to pay for prisoners who are transgender and have sex change operations. And then it turned into this, well, I think that's BS that I have to pay for that. And then there was a comment made about how some of these people are depressed and try to have suicide. And it was actually, the way it was framed was actually quite horrible and derogatory, I thought. And afterwards, I confronted him with this. I said, Glenn, every one of those people you talked about and dismissed, they were children, they had parents, their parents cared for them. Did you choose to be a heterosexual? Really? Do you think anyone would choose to be in that position and all the suffering and the pain that goes with that when you expose yourself? And then he thought about it and reprocessed it, right? And he apologized, right? But that's how you have to, I think engage in that way.
Nice.
So getting back to you,
Back to business.
nobody wants
Back
to
to
hear me. We were talking about sustainability, and we're talking about kindness. And as I think everyone in this room knows, when you run an international business in places like where products are made in India or China or even other places, you know, the supply chain there, the following of how things are made, environmental issues, all become issues. And, you know, some companies sort of pretend it doesn't exist and I get my product. But how has that affected you? What have you done? And really, what's the cost of that in terms of business? Because I know you have this idea, I think it's by 2020, of being fully sustainable.
Well, we have huge commitments of the steps we're taking to become 100% sustainable. We won't be 100% by 2020 because it's massive what we're trying to do. But we've made a lot of headway. We've done a lot on, you know, like I think almost all of our cottons are organic. Most of our linens are now organic. We're doing this Blue Sign Certified, which is kind of like a gold, LEED's gold standard for the dyeing industry. So, you know, we're doing that. We're doing that in some of our in one of our dye houses in China, and we're trying to move as many products there to, you know, and then we're working with other dye houses and trying to change the dye houses in China. And we did a big summit, but that's on the sustainability. We're doing a lot of work around wool and chlorine-free wool and lots of things, but around the workers, we've been working in China. I think we're one of the first, we were part of actually involved in working on the regulations to, it's called the social accountable standards. We've been doing that for many years, sort of going into the factories, monitoring the factories, but more than monitoring the factories, actually creating programs and, you know, doing things and really digging in much more deeply. Most companies pretty much accept the standards, you know, the paperwork that they're given, you know, and we dig in. We have, I don't know if I should tell how we do it, but we have like our kind of detective who, I don't want to broadcast how we do this, but we can find out what's really going on in factories because of the way we go at it. And so we were actually able to correct different situations, and we go in and we really work with people, because being there is how we make a difference. You know, we can say to Glenn Beck, you're not interested in talking to you, or talking to him, maybe you change things. So being in China, when we first arrived in China, we found out that there were padlocks on dormitory doors. This was 20 years ago. You know, we don't find anything like that in any factory that we work in. You know, so there were situations that were not good, but getting in there, you know, we didn't just walk away. We got in there and changed that. And, you know, little by little now they're asking us, inviting us to train the managers on the floor because of the way they want them to treat the people better. So it's pretty interesting what we can do just by inch being there. And we're doing a program in India, and it's good. It's good. It's not perfect, but inch by inch, baby steps, things change. You know, it's pretty interesting. And we're doing a program in India, but I won't.
Tell us.
Well, we found that, and again, we have the people that we draw in are incredible in this company, and they're just so passionate and purposeful, and they don't just go to the factories and do their work. They want to know, they want to make things better. And so in India, we have these handloom people, and we make a lot of scarves, and they're artisanal and beautiful, and but the people actually making them, though we pay, you know, $25 to $50 for a scarf made in India, probably more in the 25 range sort of for most of them. But, you know, the money that gets to that worker is usually 50 cents. And we didn't know that. And so, again, through digging, we find out there's millions of middlemen and a lot of corruption, and this person's got to get paid before this person gets the, you know. So, you know, we're going in there and little by little, you know, working with them and, you know, finding our own pathway to make it right for those people. And at the same time bringing programs, personal growth and development, dance workshops, dancing.
That seems to be the core of a lot of it.
Like, something like that, you know. Yeah. So we have a girls' leadership program. Recently, the woman who leads that was over in India with on our project, and so she was sending me pictures, so it was fun.
So when you try to do those things, is it just greed that's the back end of this, or is it, well, this is how it's always been done, and this is just the nature of corruption in this, and then once they, you know, you sort of say, look, it doesn't have to be this way, and you can create an environment where you don't have to basically make the workers slaves.
Right.
Do they embrace that, or is it always just a work in progress where you're always having to push and push?
No, I would say they're embracing it. I think that, like, for example, in China, and also in everywhere where they produce clothes, you know, they are under so much pressure for, you know, the cost, to get the cost down. You know, most of the manufacturers move from one factory to another, negotiate a price, push the price down all the time. And so, you know, and they're competing because customers want to buy clothes cheaply. Right. So, you know, so they're always up against the wall. They would prefer to pay better, and, you know, yes, I think for the most part, they would. And so it's, you know, in our case, we work with the same factories we have for many, many years. And, you know, so we created an ongoing relationship to try to make the flow of work for them, and to try to, you know, make it possible, you know, to pay their people well enough because they make enough on the product. So it's a constant massaging thing, you know. And they do want to, I don't know, sometimes it's hard to know, they want to please us, but they let us in, and they let us, you know, and if we're willing to work with the people and teach the people, they let us. It's a good thing.
Well, that's wonderful. So you're talking about a girls program? Did you mention something?
Yeah, we have a girls program.
Oh,
yes, we've been doing this is the 7th year, and we're taking boys this summer. Well, this has started with my 22-year-old daughter when she was 16. I thought, oh, she needs a leadership program. So we created a girls program, which is also, when I was talking about personal growth and development, you know, we wanted to do leadership training and personal growth and development, and we wanted to do women's leadership program, but it all seemed a little too complicated, so we thought, let's just start with a 2-week program for girls. We can just start, you know, fresh and just, you know, teach them. You know, teach is the wrong word, because what we do is draw them out. That's what we do, and try to help them become, you know, who they are, and just show up more fully competent and connected and creative and things like that. So it's a really wonderful program. We've spent, not me personally, but the team, small team, spent 6-7 years now in refining it, and now we're being invited to take it out to DC and Seattle and Japan. The Japanese government or some agency in Japan invited us to, we sent a group over there. So I think that'll be great for the Japanese girls.
Oh,
anyway,
wonderful.
just start, you know, just again, it's still pretty small, you know, but it's exciting. It's, you know, it's all trying to grow. Yeah. And we're also hoping to, we're researching and we're getting close on starting a local factory in New York too. So, because we really want to learn more and more about the workers and, you know, what their lives are like and how we can make the thing work. So anyway, so that's it. So it's all, you know, how to make business better. You know, how to use business to make the world a better place, to help people, to create environments that people can grow and learn and develop. And it's not perfect. It's far, far from perfect. And, you know, that's the hard part for me. I always want it to be just like your guy back there. I want the whole world to feel compassion. You want I want my whole company to, have the experiences
But it is possible. I mean, see, I think though, a lot of people, especially I think in the fashion industry, which I think is, although I'm a country neurosurgeon, I think in the fashion industry it's a very competitive environment. And it's interesting though that you intentionally moved to, is it Irvington?
Right.
New York,
Yeah.
On the banks of the Hudson, and sort of not in the middle of the
city.
The city, and you've never had a show, is that correct, or at least a runway?
Right. We don't do those.
Yeah.
No, we do have offices in New York though. Now we're kind of split between Irvington and New York. Basically, I moved out when my 3-year-old son was 3 because it wasn't working living in the city. So. So it's nice, it's quiet out there. And then as we built the design teams more and, merchandisers, and then we had to set up a whole showroom and everything in the city. So we're split, so I get to go back and forth. A lot of people go back and forth. So we have a mixed life there. It's good. It's good.
Well, I think the point though is that, for people who are starting businesses, or there's sometimes an impression you have to be sort of in the center of everything.
Right, yeah. Or it's really glamorous, or something. People think the fashion industry, they have to keep up with the hype, and it's for me. It's always been, the clothes have always been about just real clothes. What do we really wear? What's going to really make us feel good? My favorite thing is women always would say that your clothes have changed my life. So now my mantra is, really change lives.
No, that's incredible. So when is there going to be a men's?
I know. Well, we tried. A couple of years ago, we were experimenting with a men's line, but then it just got too confusing. So we didn't do it. Maybe one day we find the right passionate man who really has a vision. We may. I don't know. It feels farther away than it did, and when I first started designing clothes, men would always come into the store and say, well, when are you going to design for men? Oh, in a couple of years. Now it's like 30 years later. I go well, maybe next life.
One of the things I want to comment on and get your reaction, and I think you've answered in some ways, but just to bring it forth so people sort of hear it again, is I think a lot of people oftentimes that think that this concept of sort of kindness and compassion is mamby-pamby. You said, there's still a lot of work in my business.
Yeah.
And, don't be fooled that sort of, if you're kind or compassionate, it doesn't require a lot of work or their demands in whatever you do. I mean, that is, if you want to excel in life, if you want to be a change maker, it requires passion, commitment, effort. And it's not sort of la-la land where you're wishing the magic fairies will come out and make everything better. That happens sometimes, I think. It hasn't happened to me quite yet, but I'm hoping. But it's really true. I mean, the work that we do here, the work that you do, to be a change maker, to do what you have done has required incredible work, effort, and sacrifice. I think, and you use the word intention. But I think this idea of intentionality, and this is really a critically important concept of functioning with intention. And when you center your life around this intention of kindness, compassion, making the world a better place, thinking about how your own life impacts others and what it is that you do impacts others, and look at this connection and this chain, then you start seeing the world in a different way. And studies have shown, and I think clearly this is why you get so many passionate people who connect with you, is that when you care, when you're compassionate, not only does it change you, but it changes everything around you, and really profoundly changes one's life for the better. What I'd like to do now is maybe take some questions. We have microphones on either side, so if you want to, sometimes we have people who run around and carry the mics to people, but if any of you have any questions, please feel free to go up to the microphone and ask them.
I have actually have a comment. I actually worked at the Stanford store for 4 years. And so to be able to be in the room with you and my dear friend Jane, it's just a real pleasure for me. But one thing, your words, vulnerability and kindness, what I experienced there, and you've not really spoken about, the bottom line. If you're selling clothes, and we can go buy clothes in a million different places, but what I always found working there was that I wasn't really there to sell the clothes. I was there to be compassionate to the women who walked into the store and their husbands who came and sat on the couches. And I was there to allow them to be vulnerable. Because when you're in a dressing room with women who are taking their clothes off, that is like the most vulnerable point that you can be at. And I always felt that, we weren't on commission, we were well taken care of. If we had problems, we knew who to call. That we were given as employees this ability to make decisions, and that we were trusted, and that we were a valuable part of the organization. And I was there for 4 years, and I really believe that that was a place where I started becoming a seeker. It was a place where, as I was steaming clothes, it just became this act of joy, because I knew that someone was going to come in and touch that. And now when I shop and they don't steam their clothes, it makes me insane, because I feel like they don't care. They're just
Will you come
throwing
back
hangers.
and work for us?
Why are you? I would just do it because it was so fun. But I just, my point is that you have this enormous operation, and it works throughout the entire world. But yet, when it comes down to that individual transaction, where I'm wrapping your things up beautifully with this ribbon and the little dots and the boxes, and you walk out of there feeling so special. And I have relationships with customers who they would come in every week, and you gave us that opportunity, and you staffed the stores in a way where we were able to create relationship. And it's just something that I felt was top down. And it's always has stayed with me, and it changed my life. And I just want to thank you for that opportunity. And we think about the.
I did not hire her to do that. I didn't tell her to do that. Thank you.
I wish
That's
as a man
fantastic.
I was able to go into the store.
Oh, you can go in the store and hang out, read the newspaper.
But let me ask you a question, because in some ways she brought up a critical aspect, which is how do you have your vision manifest itself as a mission and a culture? And I think, is it Susan Shore who helped with that? But did you realize that this was really the core when you sort of translate into everything that you do to create this culture that is well recognized and everyone knows that that's what it is?
What was your question? Did I intend
How do you create a culture?
Oh, okay. Oh, well, good. So you're talking. Yeah. I think it starts with sort of just kind of philosophy or something, like what do you think matters, and kind of trying to lay that out. So we laid out, certain principles. Won't be able to quote them right now. Because I'm going to go blank, but that always happens to me. But certain practices and certain principles, and then we had workshops and brought people in and helped people understand. We always bring the leaders of all the retail stores into New York usually twice a year. It used to be 3 times a year for meetings and kind of enculturate and so to learn about what matters, and maybe we do a workshop on giving and receiving feedback, or working with a team, or listening, or things like that. So you bring some of those practices through those kinds of things, and some of it is just really basic things like serving people and like being with people. Anyways, it's a little complicated, but yeah, it's.
Well,
yes, sir.
I just wanted to say that you really encapsulate what the Dalai Lama said, that to paraphrase, he says prayer is not enough. We need humanistic valued institutions. And I think that's what you are exemplifying. It. You were able to bring that into your institution, the values of being humanistic.
Nice.
And I just think that that is where we could go when we really want to be genuine to make some change. Is to, again, bring the humanistic values into your institutions.
Right.
And then that way we could start formulating the real deal.
Yeah, yeah. So it starts with us, but then how do we create those environments? And then help others to create those environments. That's why I have the Learning Lab, so that we can, share what we do. And in fact, as we started to try to, I'm going to ramble off now. Go down a rabbit hole.
Actually, I want to come back to that. I want to come back to that to ask you. So, is the Learning Lab then is going to be a place where this content, if you will be accessible?
Right. Yes, it already is, actually. One of the things, I actually created the Learning Lab because we were doing personal growth and development. We were testing, prototyping workshops, purpose workshops, that kind of thing. And some of the people in the people and culture area of the company got a little nervous that we were crossing lines, that it was too deep and too personal to work. And so we decided that we would separate it out and create a learning center where the employees could come, would be encouraged to come, but it would also be open to the public. So we will share. We are in the process of sharing some of our practices, and also drawing in teachers, maybe bringing speakers, hopefully invite you, and that kind of thing. So we're doing more this spring, and and we'll keep going. But it's exciting because it's like that. If we can figure out how to create environments and then share what we know. It's the same thing about the sustainability. I always say I don't want to just do sustainability for our company, because in 5 years, even if we did make it to 100% sustainable, what about the rest of the fashion companies? Right. So we have to get out there and share. I have to learn how to public speak, and we have to share what we know so that the rest of the fashion industry will come along with us.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So
actually, Eileen met our director of science, Emma Seppola.
Emma.
Yes,
she's a
Emma.
delight.
Yeah, isn't she wonderful? But Emma, just to mention, she also has a book called The Happiness Track, which really, in some ways, talks about many of the issues we've been discussing here about how do you live a life of purpose, how do you function in business, and give you tools to do that, and also the references in terms of science to do that. So I would recommend, if anyone is interested, that it really is a wonderful book.
And if you're on the East Coast, I don't know the date, she's speaking at the Learning Lab.
So look up the Learning. How do people find the Learning Lab?
Learning Lab is Eileen Fisher Learning Lab, EileenFisherLearningLab.com. There you go.
Well,
we have business cards. We have, don't we? Yes,
do
we do. We have something.
We have something.
We have something if you want it.
Anyone who's interested, we will get it to you if you.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Was that Emma Seppola?
Yeah.
Yeah, she just moved into my neighborhood.
So you're in Hartford or somewhere in Connecticut?
In Guilford.
Guilford.
Yeah.
Nice. She's delightful.
She's delightful, yeah. I wanted to say that I had a flashback tonight listening to you, because I was a stressed out techie in the Valley many years ago.
And you started dancing. No.
No, I went to hear a woman executive speak. And instead of we were so used to spinning these tech companies, this is what we intended to do, right? We fumbled our way to wherever we were. But this woman got up and talked about her failures. And it was a woman, first of all, and she was talking about her failures, and I was just sort of in shock listening to this. And she talked about losing her house. She had a computer training program, a computer training company, and then the economy turned down, and they pulled all those benefits out of companies, and the company crashed. And so she went through the history. Tonight, listening to you, I had that same sort of feeling, but you were taking it another level because you were talking about your human experience, right? And being frightened by people that you're interviewing, and you're Eileen Fisher, right? And it's just so refreshing to be able to see people for, as a human. But that's not my question. I was interested, you're talking about these kind of explicit trainings that you're doing, group trainings. Are you changing your processes within the company in any way to kind of, reduce the stress of having the way that people are speaking in a group meeting, or any sort of like implicit changes in the processes?
My team members are shaking their head yes, but are we changing the process? In meetings? Well, we have processes that we use around. Okay, so for example, we meet in circles, and we always begin every meeting. We've been doing this for 10 years, where we have a moment of silence. We ring a bell, and usually we go around the circle and begin with some kind of check-in, and it's often how am I feeling right now. Sometimes it's a funny thing, like what's your weather, how do you, like I feel rainy today, or something, that we got that from the girls leadership program. But sometimes, but usually it's more just, you tell something like oh my God, my son made me crazy this weekend, or I woke up this morning and the water didn't work in my house. That did happen to me the other day, and my son did make me crazy. So those things do happen. But and sometimes it's wow, I'm in a great mood. Like I was just in a meeting yesterday. Was that yesterday? Yeah. And we went around the room, and people, the facilitator in the room said, well, so just give yourself a score of 1 to 10 today. Go around the room, just like, what's your score? Like, what score for, like how we feel? Yeah, how are you feeling? What's your score? Okay, all right, so people went around the room, I'm a 3, I'm a 9, I'm a, whatever, 6.8, or, whatever, and just that kind of thing, or, sharing. But the point you're making is human. It's making some human connection, and then we realize we're working with human beings, it seems basic, but it's the same thing in the factory in China. We're how do we make this, or with the store, when you're greeting a customer, so that it's you're serving and you're in connection somehow. So you recognize
your automatic brain.
Right. That's good. Yeah.
Connect.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I'm going to go back to is, for me, I'm going back to this word embodiment, because that's sort of the edge that I've been working with in the last couple of years. In order to do this, it seems important to really know what you're actually feeling in your body. And also, in doing this, I'm realizing that there's so much wisdom and, creativity and information that I didn't have access to only 2 years ago. Like, I know that that's fear. Oh, that means yes, or I'm excited, or I'm, I didn't know that. And so some of it is that we're practicing it in our circles, and it's not going into all sections of the company yet. We're still prototyping and playing in, some areas. It hasn't made it everywhere, but it's getting out there in some areas. So anyway.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Why I always end with anyway. Why do I do that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You talked about your goal of being compassionate within your company. I was wondering if you knew about your competitors in the fashion industry who you thought did a good job at that.
At being compassionate in the workplace?
Or creating a culture.
Or around sustainability? No. About who in the fashion industry is compassionate in their culture? I don't know. Does anybody else know? I don't know. I don't hear that about other companies. That doesn't mean they're not.
There was a really interesting article in the New York Times about Dantela Versace a few days ago.
Oh, yes, about
Donatella
Versace?
Versace.
Oh.
Uh-huh,
She took over the company after her brother died a few years ago.
right, Donatella? Yeah, yeah. What did it say?
Oh, she seemed really fun, and
Oh, she's fun. Okay, that's cool.
I was just wondering. I mean, this is what I read in a New York Times
Okay.
article. You're an insider. I was wondering if you might know about your competitors, but I
Well, you
guess
know
not.
what? It's funny because I'm kind of like almost an anti-fashion person. I almost don't participate in most of that, you know.
Eileen, do you know, though, are there any fashion houses that you're aware that are really looking at this issue of sustainability or going back?
There are. Fashion houses. Well, there's this company called Caring, which owns Puma. Do you know the?
Sure.
Yeah, and they own Stella McCartney, and so they did something called the environmental P&L a few years ago, which we actually referred to. So their idea was to actually begin to measure all of the things, all of the impacts, and rate themselves, and decide what it would actually cost if they had to pay for their impacts on air and water, you know. And I think that I can't remember what the result was, but it would like double the cost of their products or something. So that's probably accurate. But the idea of measuring, you know, impacts is really important, and not too many companies are doing it. Actually, we're the first fashion company that's become a B Corp. Is anybody familiar with that?
Yeah.
We just became a B Corp. So that means you have to measure your environmental and social impacts, and you have to meet a certain standard to become a B Corp. So personally, I think it's really a new business model that in the future we're not going to just be measured on, you know, how much money we make, but also on how much, you know, on those impacts. And I think it's going to be really important for investments. I think one day when we make investments, we're going to know what's the rating of this company, not just how much money do they make. And I also think when we buy products, there's going to be some way that we're going to be, just like with ingredients in food, there's going to be a way that we're going to be able to know what is the impact of this company that I'm buying this from, what kind of rating do they get. I hope for this day, but I believe in it. There's an organization called SASB, Sustainable Accounting Standards Bureau, and they're trying to make all Wall Street companies follow their standards, or you know, report on their measurements. So I don't know all the details, but it's pretty interesting. So I have a lot of hope that this kind of thing will be really important for creating new business models that are much more compassionate, because, I mean, compassion is how we treat each other, of course, and it's also how we treat the earth and, you know, how we take care of the workers and everyone involved in business communities. So,
Just
anyway.
a comment, you know, you were going back a little bit, you were talking about how you were interviewing the CE, or these
yes.
potential
It
people
wasn't
for-
actually CEOs,
Oh,
I'm not, but
I mean, somebody
Okay.
a higher position,
Yeah.
some high position. But it reminded me of what happens sometimes, though, is that oftentimes we're approached by people and who can be, and not particularly in this case, but who can be aggressive or actually mean, or, you know, and you respond to them.
yeah.
And what we forget sometimes, though, is their action towards us often doesn't have anything to do with us, right? But we react that way. And one of the, I think, greatest lessons we can learn is to recognize that people manifest behaviors that don't even have any relationship to the events at hand. And sometimes people can be hurting, being in pain, yet we have a tendency to react to them. And one of the things I found, and I don't know if you found this as well, is when you're in that situation, to sort of pause a little bit, to try to sit there and say, what is motivating, you know, them to act this way and in this fashion? And sometimes you suddenly get an insight that really there's something else going on, and it allows you not to be as reactive or just as equally aggressive. And I think it's really a lesson that can be very, very helpful. I
That's
think.
really good. You're talking about triggers. And I guess being a neurosurgeon, you know about the neurological components. And I have, again, recently been involved in doing somatic experiencing. Is anybody familiar with that work? It's very, very powerful. Really credible, because it's actually, part of the idea is that, trauma isn't just, like the people who've been traumatized because they saw something terrible or went in an accident or whatever, or in a war. But 80% of us carry trauma, and that there's actually a neurological response that our body has when we're triggered. It's like a neurological pathway that, I don't have to tell you this. But when doing some of this trauma kind of work, the somatic work, I was able to release triggers. And for example, I've told this story, some of you might have heard it before, but my ex-husband I was mentioning earlier, we had a very difficult divorce and difficult relationship, and a lot of frustration for me, and I couldn't speak clearly, I couldn't stand up to him, and I just, and even 15 years after our divorce, I was still, I just hear his voice and I would shut down. I would just be, it would be this kind of strange experience, this triggered experience. So I did some of this somatic work. I worked this woman named Diane Poole Heller. Do you know Diane Poole Heller? Do you know Peter Levine? Anyway, they really interesting new kind of work. I really think it's cutting edge. And so I literally followed along on one DVD, and afterwards I saw my ex-husband 2 days later. I didn't expect anything to change. And I had dinner with him, with my son and him, and afterwards my son said, "Mom, something was different. There was much more equilibrium in the room." It was like, and then I realized that I wasn't shut down, that I was showing up. And it was like my brain was working, kind of like with interviewing the different candidates for these positions, that all of a sudden when I came back, I could talk to them and I could experience them in a different way. So now, 2 years later, I work with my ex-husband. I don't work, but I work with him around the kids and different issues that still come up, and I invite him over, I give him a hug, all is well. He still says the same weird things he always said, but it doesn't trigger me.
But
I'm free. It's amazing.
But that's really the key, isn't it? I mean, because what you're describing too is sort of the circumstance didn't change. What changed was how you reacted to the circumstance. Mm-hmm. And that's really the key, is how your body reacts. And this is some of the work that we do to teach people.
Yeah, so I'm very curious about your processes and wanna, yeah.
And I hope all of you will. We have time, yes ma'am, we'll do 2 more questions, okay.
I'm very interested in whether or not we can really scale up the reality of being able to create organizations that are based on values and mission. I have worked in the nonprofit world and founded an organization that was based on values, and such values as compassion and love, the Global Fund for Women. I think
Global Fund for Women, yes.
Yeah. And so I tried really to have an effect in the nonprofit world to say that we really could do things differently. We could listen to grantees instead of telling them what to do, and so on and so forth. Now I teach here on love as a force for social justice.
Nice.
And I find, and this is my impression, I find that there are just so many people who want to put these values into practice. Mm-hmm. Students are amazing and wonderful.
Yeah.
But not just students, but people that I've invited to speak at my class about how they are attempting to put these values, love and compassion, loving kindness, into practice in their businesses, their nonprofits, their worlds. But should we be teaching this in the business schools, or, I mean, obviously in kindergartens.
In kindergarten, right.
But immediately I think of the business schools as well, not just the kindergartens. In the law schools, in the medical schools, and teaching, but particularly in business schools. I mean, I was thinking, you should be in a course at the business school on love as a force for change,
Nice.
for social justice.
Nice.
I'd like to see it scaled up. So I'm interested in any ideas you have about that.
Yeah, I love the scale up idea. And I think, well, I think that we talked a little bit about scaling up on the phone too. And I mean, I do think we have, it's not the same as people, but we have the powerful tool of the internet. And so there's, you know, massive online courses and things that can reach a lot of people. So, I mean, that's one idea. I know we're trying to, with the Learning Lab, you know, create online opportunities to engage beyond just classes, but, you know, also other opportunities. But, you know, I'm part of the reason I want to do the Learning Lab, and we're in the process of doing it, is because I want to be able to, you know, share what we're learning as we're learning, you know, so.
Examples, because I think people are really afraid to use the word love right out loud.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I don't know why I find love easier than compassion. I don't know. It doesn't make, you know.
How about love and compassion?
Let's see.
Yes, sir. Why
Oh,
don't
what's
we,
the difference? Then you have to answer the. No.
So, with all due respect to both of you, and much is due, my question really has to do with the individual versus the collective. And when you say, and when we hear over and over again, that responsibility is on the individual, and in this argument too, you said it, about compassion. And I'm curious if that doesn't absolve us collectively in a way to actually address the structural barriers that are in place in preventing us from creating a society that is really compassionate. And I wonder what you have to say to that.
I think you should take it.
That's an easy question.
Well, you know, it's interesting because in some ways it relates to where this young lady who was talking about the business school and embracing love. When the business schools are run by people who are primarily the source of the problem, it's really hard to get them to talk about love, right? In fact, I can give you an example of having a conversation with somebody prominent in the business school here who basically said, I don't get this compassion thing, right? So until you have people enlightened who understand, and this is happening in the business world, here's an example, but it's also happening in other places. People understand that when you actually embrace these principles, you actually get individuals who are more creative, more productive, more happy, and are more committed to your own mission. So there is a bottom line for this in a capitalist society. But you're right. I mean, as an example, we have institutionalized poverty. How is it even possible that we have the highest level of childhood poverty in all of the industrialized countries in the United States, yet we're the most affluent and we consume 25% of the resources? How is it possible that we have one of the worst healthcare systems in all of the industrialized countries that cost more than anything else? These are structural problems. And yes, it is great for the individual to work on these problems. And we do have immense potential and capacity. But when you have grown up in generational poverty or a minority, your ability to go to a different level in society is almost zero. And it's when people realize that it is not getting better for them, and they realize that the only way it's going to change is when they take the responsibility, not only personal development, but personal responsibility for the change. Somebody said, one of the ways leaders are created and a society is created is because people don't exercise their vote. Well, if you don't show up to vote and you get people you don't like, but I think it's hard. But never forget, every one of us has the capacity to change. One person, if not others, every day. And when you have this intention, it potentially can take these little small ripples that we're talking about here and influence others to do better. It's not going to happen overnight. I tell people we're at the start of an age of compassion. We had an age of enlightenment, and that took well over a century. And I think that the only way our species is going to survive is to have the structural changes that you're talking about. And each of us can contribute to that.
Cool.
Thank you. I would like to thank all of you for coming, and I appreciate you taking the time. For those who are unfamiliar with our work, we are the Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. We do fundamental research to promote these values and define the value proposition of these behaviors and give people the tools to change their lives and also society. So thank you.